My name is Samantha Monroe. I'm 22 years old, a senior in medical school, and up until a few months ago, I still believed naively that love alone could hold a family together. But that illusion shattered the day I stood at the edge of Black Hollow Cliff and watched my parents push my sister off it. Yes, you heard that right. They pushed her, and they didn't know I was watching. My sister Isabel has always been my light. She's 3 years older than me, graceful, brilliant, and kind. Someone who once moved entire audiences with her cello performances. Before the accident, she had offers from symphonies across the country, but 2 years ago, a crash on a rain-slick road paralyzed her from the waist down, ending not just her career but something deeper inside her. After that, things in our family started to crack. At first, it was subtle, our parents growing quieter around her, more impatient. Then came the resentment, the sighs when they had to help her into her wheelchair, the way they stopped making room for her at the dinner table. I noticed. And Isabel noticed too, but she never said a word. And then, one weekend, they told her they wanted to take her on a quiet nature trip. Just the three of them. She texted me from the driveway with a smiley face emoji and said, "Maybe this is their way of healing things." I wish I'd told her to run. That day changed everything. What I saw, what I did afterward, and what I had to become to protect Isabel, none of it was easy. But I'll tell it now. Not just for her, but for every person who's ever been betrayed by the ones who were supposed to love them most. Before the world broke in half, before the cliff and the betrayal, we were just two sisters lying on the floor of our childhood bedroom, whispering about the stars on the ceiling. Isabel used to tell me that if she practiced hard enough, one day she'd perform on the world's greatest stages. She wanted to play at Carnegie Hall. She wanted to make Grandpa cry with pride. She nearly did, until the accident. We grew up in Ashford Hollow, a quiet town in Oregon where neighbors still borrowed sugar and kids biked until dark. Our parents, Daniel and Meredith Monroe, were the kind of couple people envied. Dad was a financial advisor who dressed like he lived inside a men's catalog, always polished, always in control. Mom taught high school literature and had a voice that melted tension. People looked at them like they were saints. And maybe, for a while, they were. Isabel was the one who carried the family spotlight. She was elegance and precision, even as a kid. When she played the cello, time seemed to hold its breath. I'd watch from the wings, always in awe, always clapping the loudest. I never envied her, not really. I was the quieter one, the observer, the girl who loved biology and dreamed of becoming a doctor. Then came the storm. 2 years ago, after a regional recital in Portland, Isabel and Grandpa were driving home. It was raining hard, and a semi lost control on a curve. The crash killed Grandpa instantly. Isabel was pulled from the wreckage hours later, still breathing but with a shattered spine. She was 23. Her life, as she knew it, ended that night. When I got the call, I was in the middle of a night shift shadowing trauma nurses. I dropped everything and drove 5 hours straight to the hospital, still in scrubs. When I reached her room, she was lying pale and still, her long brown hair tangled over the pillow, her hands resting motionless on the thin hospital blanket. She looked at me and smiled. "Sam," she whispered, "I'm still here." That moment broke me. Not the accident, not the prognosis, but the way she smiled like she had to comfort me. The first few months after her injury were hard, but not hopeless. She learned to use a wheelchair. She went to physical therapy. She even tried to play music again, her bow trembling in her hand. Our parents were supportive, at least on the surface. They took time off work, remodeled part of the house to accommodate her chair, and acted like a family in crisis learning to cope. But over time, their support curdled into something else. It started with silence, with Mom forgetting Isabel's therapy appointments, with Dad sighing when Isabel asked for help. Then came the tension arguments behind closed doors, muffled words like burden, and never the same. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Stress, grief, burnout. That's what I told myself. But the more I visited home from college, the clearer it became. The warmth had drained from our house. Isabel's room was always dim, like she was slowly disappearing from their lives. She tried to hide it. She always tried to be strong. But strength doesn't erase pain. It just hides it better. One weekend, as I sat beside her in the garden, she looked at me and asked, "Do you think they're disappointed in me? I nearly dropped my tea." "What, of course not." She shrugged, her fingers picking at the edge of her blanket. "They don't look at me the same. Not since Grandpa died. Not since I became this. You're still you. Belle." She didn't reply. I told myself I'd do more, check in more, visit more often. But I was juggling school, rotations, and part-time work. And I knew Isabel didn't want me to put my life on hold for her. She always said, "Don't let my wheels become your weight," but everything changed the day I learned about the trust. Apparently, Grandpa had left behind a 7-figure trust fund for Isabel. A full $1 million. Locked away until she turned 25. He created it long before the accident, when her future in classical music looked unstoppable. According to his lawyer, the fund was for her artistic and personal development, to be used at her discretion. That money wasn't meant to fix broken bones. It was meant to build dreams. I didn't think much of it at first. Grandpa had always adored Isabel, and the money was her right. But the way my parents reacted chilled me. I overheard them one night during a visit home. I'd gone into the kitchen for water and stopped short when I heard their voices in the dining room. "She doesn't need all that money," my mother said sharply. "It's wasted on her now." "She can't even travel alone," Dad added, voice low. "You think she's going to compose symphonies from a hospital bed?" There was silence. "Then we should talk to the lawyer," Mom murmured. "See if we can gain guardianship over the trust. She still lives under our roof." Something in me snapped. I stepped back before they could see me. Water forgotten. Heart pounding in my ears. It wasn't just bitterness. It was greed. Greed disguised as caretaking. From that night forward, I never looked at them the same. They had gone from parents to predators. And Isabel, their own daughter, had become their prey. I began to worry all the time. About what they might say to her when I wasn't there. About what they might do. At night, I imagined her alone in that dark room, wondering why the people who once cheered for her now avoided eye contact. That's when I started taking precautions. I'm not a tech expert like Caleb from some other story. But I knew enough. I bought a GPS tracking chip, small, discreet, and sewed it into the lining of Isabel's wheelchair cushion during one of our movie nights. I told myself it was just in case she got lost, or in case of emergencies. But the truth, I didn't trust our parents anymore. I prayed I'd never have to use it, that I was being paranoid, that despite the words I'd overheard, they would never do anything truly awful. But prayers are fragile things. And the weekend they told her, "Let's go on a family nature trip, just us." Something inside me screamed. I smiled and waved them off. I hugged Isabel and kissed her cheek. And the moment their car pulled away from the driveway, I opened the GPS app, just in case. The GPS dot on the screen blinked steadily, almost mockingly. It showed my parents' car heading northwest, away from Ashford Hollow and toward the Black Hollow Forest Preserve, a stretch of wilderness known more for its rugged cliffs than for any accessibility. It wasn't a place for leisure walks or picnics, especially not for someone in a wheelchair, and certainly not for someone like Isabel. I stared at the map, heart pounding against my ribs. I told myself it was fine. Maybe they were taking her to a lookout point. Maybe they wanted to bond again, to try and undo what they'd broken. Maybe. 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 But none of it felt right. The last text I got from Isabel was short. We just stopped for coffee. Feels weird. Mom won't stop smiling. It's strange. That was 2 hours ago, and now they were entering the Black Hollow perimeter, a place I knew all too well from our childhood hikes. A place with winding, unpaved roads, no cell service, and the infamous overlook known as Echo Cliff. Local teens told stories about it. Some said it was haunted. Others just liked the adrenaline rush of standing near the edge. I had no idea what my parents were doing there. But I knew I had to go. Now. I grabbed my car keys, my charger, and my pepper spray, tossed them all into a backpack, and ran down the stairs of my dorm. My hands trembled as I opened my GPS again. The dot had stopped moving just outside the forest, near the overlook trailhead. No. I floored the gas the moment I got on the interstate. My car roared down the highway, and the clouds above thickened like bruises. Every mile between me and that forest felt like a scream trapped in my throat. I couldn't call. Not Isabel, no signal. Not my parents, they wouldn't pick up. I tried anyway, straight to voicemail. My mind spiraled into worst-case scenarios. What if she slipped off the trail? What if they left her alone somewhere? What if no? Stop. She's alive. She's okay. You're just being overprotective. Just paranoid. But I wasn't. Not this time. 2 hours later, I pulled off the main road and onto the gravel path leading to the Black Hollow Trail. The trees loomed like sentinels, their limbs bare and skeletal under the weight of early winter. My tires crunched over pine needles and frost. The GPS app showed I was close. Then I saw it. My parents' car, parked crookedly at the edge of the trailhead. The back door still ajar. I killed my engine, heart hammering, and scanned the area. No voices, no footsteps. Just the rustling wind and the dry hiss of leaves brushing one another. I followed the path quietly, the cold air biting my cheeks. I kept my eyes on the trail ahead and my phone clutched tight in my hand. Then I heard something. A faint voice. Wind. No speech. 2 voices, low and tense. A man's voice, then a woman's. I moved slower, stepping carefully over roots and broken branches until I reached a rocky bend. Beyond that bend, the cliff. I stopped behind a pine tree, barely breathing, and then I saw them. My parents were standing near the edge of the cliff, just a few feet behind Isabel's wheelchair. She was sitting still, her long brown hair fluttering in the wind, hands resting on her lap. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, but there was something off in her posture. Rigid, alert, not peaceful, not calm. Just do it. Mom hissed. What if she screams? Dad whispered. She won't. Just now. Before anyone shows up, I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My entire body turned to ice. Then it happened. My father walked up behind the wheelchair. He didn't say a word. He just pushed hard. I gasped, but no sound escaped my throat. The wheelchair rolled forward. Isabel's body jerked with it, and then she was gone. A short, sharp scream and then silence. Not even an echo, just the wind. I stumbled backward behind the tree, bile rising in my throat. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the ground, gripping the soil, trying not to scream. My parents stood motionless for a moment, staring down into the void. Then Mom spoke, voice flat. It's done. They turned and walked back down the trail like they'd just finished unloading groceries. Not their daughter. I waited. Let them pass. Let their footsteps fade. Then I ran. I sprinted to the edge of the cliff, nearly slipping on the loose gravel. My breath came in sobs. I fell to my knees and peered over. At first, nothing. Just jagged rocks and mist. Then a flash of color. The wheelchair. Smashed. Bent. resting on a ledge maybe 30 feet below, and next to it Belle. She was there, crumpled. Blood on her forehead, but she was breathing. Her chest rose, shallow but steady. I didn't calculate, I just moved. There was a side path, narrow and steep, barely visible among the rocks. I clutched at roots and branches, sliding and scraping my hands as I climbed down. Every second, I thought she'd stop breathing, that I'd reach her too late, but I didn't. I dropped to my knees beside her, my tears falling fast now. "Belle!" I choked out, cradling her head. "It's me. I'm here." Her eyelids fluttered. She gasped, weak but aware. They pushed me," she whispered. "I know," I said, holding her tight. "I saw everything. You're safe now. I've got you." But I hadn't saved her. Not yet. We were still at the bottom of a cliff, miles from town, no signal, no help, and the people who tried to kill her thought they'd succeeded. I don't remember how long I sat there holding Isabel, maybe minutes, maybe hours. The world around us was silent except for the rustle of pine trees above and the soft, trembling breaths escaping her lips. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, already starting to dry. Her hands were cold, her skin pale as paper. I checked her for broken bones, pressing gently along her arms, shoulders, and ribs. Her spine, already paralyzed, made it hard to know if there was new damage, but I couldn't wait. There was no time for perfect assessments. She needed help, real help, and the only way out was up. The narrow, rocky trail that had led me down felt like a death sentence in reverse. It curved like a snake against the cliff face, barely wide enough for 1 foot at a time. Loose gravel and exposed roots made it treacherous. And now, I'd have to climb it with Isabel on my back. "Belle," I whispered, "I need you to hold on. I'm going to carry you." "Okay." Her eyes fluttered open. She didn't speak, but her hand reached for mine, fingers weak but trusting. "I've got you," I said again. "No one's ever gonna hurt you again." I took off my jacket and wrapped it around her to shield her from the cold, then adjusted my backpack to the front so I could balance her weight more evenly. I carefully lifted her onto my back, supporting her legs with my arms as I rose to my feet. She was featherlight, but every inch of movement felt like a mountain pressing down on me. The climb was brutal. Every step sent pain shooting through my calves. My fingers clung to rocks and roots as if they were lifelines. Isabel's breath against my neck was shallow, but rhythmic. I whispered to her with each step encouragement, apologies, anything to keep her conscious. "You're doing great," I murmured. "You're strong," she breathed. The wind howled through the canyon like a warning. At one point, my foot slipped and we nearly tumbled back down the ledge. My knee slammed into a rock, sending stars across my vision, but I held on. I couldn't afford to fall. Not now, not with Isabel's life in my hands. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. My body screamed with every motion, and sweat soaked through my clothes despite the cold. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Not until I saw the trail above flat ground. Safety. When I reached the top, I collapsed to my knees. Isabel still cradled in my arms. I looked around, gasping for breath. The cliff was empty. My parents were gone. Only their tire tracks remained in the gravel. I laid Isabel gently against a large flat rock and pulled out my phone. 1 bar, 2, then nothing. Damn it. I moved around, waving the phone in every direction, desperate for a signal. I finally found a spot, just a sliver of reception on the edge of the trail near a cluster of trees. I dialed 911 and prayed. The call connected. 911, what's your emergency? This is Samantha Monroe, I said, breathless. My sister, she's injured. She was pushed off a cliff near Black Hollow Preserve. We're at the trailhead. She's alive but needs medical help now. The operator asked for coordinates. I gave them, voice trembling. They promised to dispatch a rescue team immediately. I thanked them and hung up. Then I ran back to Isabel and knelt beside her. "Help's coming," I told her. She nodded faintly, her lips bluish from the cold. "They think I'm dead." I paused. "I know." Her eyes opened wider. "You can't let them come back." "I won't," I said. "I'm not going to let them near you ever again." The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later, lights flashing like salvation. Paramedics rushed over, and I quickly explained what had happened, everything except the part where my parents tried to kill her. That would come later, when she was stable and safe. As they loaded Isabel into the stretcher and wheeled her into the ambulance, she reached out for me. I took her hand and climbed in beside her. The ride to the hospital was quiet except for the steady beep of her vitals and the paramedic's voice calling out observations. I stared at the pale ceiling, holding her hand the entire time, unable to stop shaking. At the hospital, I gave the intake nurse a false name for myself and asked for privacy. "Please," I said. "We're in danger. Her life is at risk. Don't let anyone know she's here." The nurse, a woman in her 50s with gentle eyes, looked me up and down. Then she nodded. "Understood. We'll keep her information restricted." Isabel was taken in for scans and tests. I sat in the waiting room, numb. My phone buzzed texts from my mother. "Mom, Sam. Have you seen Isabel? We got separated on the trail. She wanted to look at the cliff and rolled too close. We couldn't reach her in time. Please come home. We're at the police station." I stared at the message, rage flooding my chest. Lies. Polished, rehearsed, predictable lies. They were already spinning the story, making themselves the victims of a tragic accident. Grieving parents, blameless bystanders. I didn't reply. Instead, I took out my phone and opened the GPS app. The tracking data from Isabel's wheelchair was still saved, an unbroken digital trail from our house to the edge of Black Hollow Cliff. I took screenshots, then uploaded the data to my laptop and saved it to a secure drive. It was proof, but I needed more. I remembered the security camera I'd installed on the side of the house months ago, after noticing how jumpy Isabel had become. It wasn't high quality, but it recorded audio and it faced the driveway. If I was lucky, it might have caught them talking before they left, before the push. I looked at the hospital hallway where Isabel lay, then back at my phone. It wasn't over yet, not even close. They thought they'd silenced her. They thought no one saw. But I did. And now I was going to show the world who they really were. The hospital room was dimly lit, the blinds pulled halfway, allowing streaks of late afternoon light to slide across the floor. Isabel was asleep, her forehead bandaged, an IV dripping slowly into her arm. I sat beside her, still wearing the same clothes from the cliff, the dried mud on my shoes reminding me this wasn't a nightmare I could wake up from. I didn't want to leave her, not even for a second, but I had to. If my parents got away with this, if they managed to twist the narrative and paint themselves as heartbroken victims, then Isabel wouldn't just be in danger, she'd be erased. I left her a note on the bedside table. "Belle, I'll be back soon. You're safe, I promise." Then I walked out of the hospital with fire in my chest and purpose in my stride. The drive back to Ashford Hollow was long and quiet. I didn't play music, didn't call anyone. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror as if my parents were tailing me, waiting to silence me too. I didn't stop until I reached the outskirts of our neighborhood, our old neighborhood. It didn't feel like home anymore. I parked 2 blocks away from our house. I didn't want to risk being seen. It was already getting dark, and shadows crawled across the familiar sidewalk where I used to ride bikes with Isabel. Our 2-story home sat still and polished, the porch lights glowing warmly like it had nothing to hide, but I knew better now. Monsters don't always live under beds. Sometimes they wear wedding rings and bake banana bread on Sundays. I walked around to the back alley where the old garden gate still stuck when you pushed it. I climbed over it instead. My parents wouldn't expect me. They thought I was either mourning or fooled. I crouched by the basement window and unlocked it with a key I'd hidden under a brick years ago, one of those childish backup plans that suddenly became survival tools. The window creaked as I slid it open and slipped inside. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and denial. I moved fast, my steps soft. Every creak in the floorboard made my heart leap. But the house was empty. No cars in the driveway, no shoes by the door. They were probably still at the station, continuing the charade. I made my way to the living room bookshelf where I'd hidden the security camera. It looked like an ordinary bookend, thick and heavy. I slid it out and twisted off the back panel, revealing the small memory card inside. I pocketed it, then scanned the room. My parents had removed all of Isabel's photos from the shelves. Her awards, her recital programs, they were gone, like she'd never existed. My throat tightened, but I pushed the grief down. Later. There would be time for that later. Now, I had a job to finish. Back in my car, parked on a dark street under a street lamp. I slid the memory card into my laptop. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but the audio thankfully was intact. I fast-forwarded through hours of mundane scenes, Dad mowing the lawn, Mom taking out trash. Then I found it, 2 days before the hike, in the driveway. The camera caught them standing by the trunk of the car, whispering in hushed tones, unaware the small lens inside the bookshelf was recording it all. Mom: "The lawyer said we can't touch the trust unless she's declared mentally incompetent or dead." Dad: "We're not monsters. Meredith." Mom: "She'll never have a normal life. This money could change ours. This trip, it's the cleanest option we'll get." Silence. Then a slow, reluctant nod from Dad. "You're sure?" he asked. "No one will suspect a thing. You know how dangerous that cliff is. We'll say she wheeled too close. It'll be tragic, but believable." I hit pause. Tears welled in my eyes. But I didn't let them fall. I saved the footage onto an encrypted drive, then onto a cloud server with a private link. I made backups. I emailed a copy to the trusted friend in cybersecurity at school, just in case something happened to me. They thought they were careful. They thought their whispers were safe. But they forgot I was watching. Back at the hospital, Isabel had woken up. She smiled weakly as I entered, her face pale but alert. "You came back," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I said I would, I replied, sitting beside her, and I got it. The proof. I have everything. She blinked slowly, as if she didn't quite believe me. "They really wanted me gone, didn't they?" she asked. I didn't sugarcoat it. "Yes, and they think they succeeded." She nodded once, the weight of the truth too heavy for more words. The next morning, I called James Harper, Grandpa's old lawyer. He'd helped set up Isabel's trust fund, a meticulous man, sharp-eyed and careful. I'd met him once as a teenager and remembered how seriously he took his duty to Grandpa. When I explained the situation and shared the video and GPS data, he was silent for a long moment. "Samantha," he finally said, "this is serious. We're not just talking about civil matters. This is attempted murder." "I know," I said. "I want them to pay for what they did. And they will," he promised. "But we need to be strategic. If they suspect Isabel's alive, they'll act again. We'll need to keep her protected while I start preparing a case." I nodded. "They won't know. I've kept everything quiet." He paused. "And Samantha, yeah, your grandfather would be proud of you." The words almost broke me, but I held it together. "Thank you," I said, voice thick. "I'm going to finish what he started, protecting her, Later that day, I met with the hospital staff in private. I told them the truth, enough of it. At least, I gave instructions to keep Isabel's presence confidential. No visitors, no phone calls allowed, only me. They agreed. One nurse pulled me aside as I was leaving her room. "I know I'm not supposed to say this," she whispered, "but your sister, she's lucky to have you." I looked back at Isabel through the glass door, watching her sketch something with her good hand. "No," I said quietly. "I'm the lucky one." For a while, things were still. Isabel remained in the recovery ward, gradually regaining her strength. Her appetite came back in small, cautious bites. She began whispering jokes again, sometimes managing a tired smile. But every time our parents' names were mentioned, her eyes darkened, the light drained from her face, and I knew whatever wounds her body had endured, the deeper ones were in her soul. She hadn't asked for revenge, but I had, and I wasn't finished. James Harper moved swiftly. He began assembling a legal team, quietly gathering the necessary forms to freeze access to Isabel's trust, prevent guardianship claims, and prepare a criminal case. The digital evidence I'd collected, the GPS tracker data, the home camera footage, was enough to trigger internal review. But for prosecutors to pursue full charges, we needed one more thing: proof of intent after the fact. We had what they said before the accident. We had what they did. But if they tried to finish what they started, even subtly, that would shatter any defense of innocence. So I had to lure them out. Late one night, I sat on the hospital's outdoor bench, my laptop on my knees and a hoodie pulled over my face. The air smelled like damp leaves and pine disinfectant, the kind of night that whispers plans in your ear. I logged onto a local Facebook gossip group under an anonymous profile, Hollow Whispers. It was the perfect channel, one that townspeople used to share rumors, sightings, and neighborhood drama. It didn't take much to set the match. I typed strange rumors going around town. Someone said Isabel Monroe didn't die after all. A man found her at the cliff and brought her to a hospital out of town. And apparently, she said her parents pushed her. I hit post and waited. Within an hour, it had 87 reactions. By sunrise, over 200 comments. People speculated wildly. Some called it clickbait. Others asked for sources. But I knew the important people would see it. My parents were obsessed with public image. Nothing disturbed them more than the idea of whispers, things they couldn't control. By noon, my burner phone buzzed. A message from the hospital's head nurse. "Your parents called asking if Isabel was a patient. They were very insistent, said they heard a wild rumor online. Should we be concerned?" My stomach clenched. They'd taken the bait. "Don't confirm anything." I texted back, "If they show up, call me immediately. And please, check any gifts or items they bring." Understood. 2 days later, they came. I was watching through a hallway camera feed when I saw them enter. My mother wore her morning clothes, subtle black slacks, and a green blouse she always wore to church. My father walked beside her, his jaw clenched, clutching a bottle of spring water and a small paper bag. Their faces were perfect masks, red eyes, trembling hands, downcast glances. To anyone else, they looked like grieving parents given a second chance. But I knew better, and so did Isabel. She was prepared. We'd rehearsed the plan the night before. If they came in, she'd pretend to sleep, say nothing, show no signs of recovery. I hid in a custodial closet down the hall, watching through the cracked door. They stepped into her room. My mother's voice floated through the open door, syrupy and brittle. "Sweetheart, oh my God, you're alive. We were so scared." Isabel didn't move. Dad walked to her bedside, placing the water bottle and the bag of cookies down carefully. His hand lingered on the water. Then he turned and walked out with Mom, Just like that. No hugs. No tears. No lingering. It wasn't love. It was logistics. The moment they left, I slipped into the room and grabbed the items they'd brought. The nurse helped me seal them into evidence bags. I had a friend from med school, Daniel, whose sister worked in a toxicology lab. I didn't give details, just said I suspected something dangerous. 2 days later, Daniel called. "Samantha, what the hell is going on? What do you mean there was enough sedative in that water to knock out a full-grown man? If she drank even half, it would have put her in a coma. With her condition, it could have killed her." I didn't say anything. I just closed my eyes and let the rage settle in my chest. They hadn't come to apologize. They'd come to finish what they started. That night, I sat by Isabel's bedside and told her everything. The social media post, the trap, the poisoned water. Her hands trembled as she gripped the bedsheet. "They really tried again," she whispered. "Yes," she nodded, slowly. "Then they don't get to pretend anymore," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "No more sympathy, no more lies." I took her hand. "We're going to expose them. Belle, publicly, legally, permanently." James Harper moved fast once I gave him the lab report. We now had premeditated conversation on camera, GPS data of the exact trail they took her on, toxicology proof of attempted poisoning, a living victim with full memory of the incident. It was enough to file charges, but James warned us, "This is a high-profile case. Your parents are respected in this town. This trial will be brutal. Are you prepared?" I looked at Isabel, who nodded from her wheelchair. "We are." He gave us a solemn smile. "Then let's bring the truth into the light." The lawsuit was filed under seal. The arrest came 2 days later. According to the officer who called me, my father shouted something about slander. My mother sobbed on the porch, insisting it was all a mistake. But this time, no one listened. This time, the mask was off. I watched from the hospital room as the news broke online. Daniel and Meredith Monroe, respected residents of Ashford Hollow, arrested on charges of attempted murder and conspiracy in connection with their daughter's near-fatal fall. Comment sections erupted. Neighbors who once praised them now posted, "I always felt something was off." Former friends asked, "How could they do this to Isabel?" I didn't reply to anyone. I just sat next to my sister, the soft hum of her monitors steady in the background. She looked at me, eyes bright with something that looked almost like peace. "Do you think we'll win?" I squeezed her hand. "We already are." The morning of the trial, the sky over Ashford Hollow was draped in gray, the kind of cold, heavy mist that felt like the world holding its breath. Outside the courthouse, news vans idled with their antennae extended like watching insects. Reporters in wool coats rehearsed their lines in low voices while townspeople murmured on the sidewalks, necks craning toward the entrance. Everyone wanted to see what the perfect Monroes had done. Inside, Isabel sat beside me in her wheelchair, her hair pulled back, her posture delicate but defiant. She wore a pale blue sweater and soft gray slacks. The bruises on her face had faded, but the memories behind her eyes hadn't. Not one of them. "You okay?" I whispered, placing my hand on hers. She nodded. "I'm ready." So was I. James Harper stood on the prosecution side, his dark gray suit impeccably pressed, his briefcase resting beside his seat like a sword sheathed in leather. He greeted us with a quiet nod and a whisper, "They won't walk away from this." I hoped he was right. Then the courtroom doors opened. Our parents were led inside in handcuffs. The gasps were immediate. My mother, pale and gaunt, wore a modest black dress, her wrists locked in steel. My father looked worse unkempt, thinner. His jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. They didn't look at us. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with a steel gaze that cut through the courtroom like a winter wind. This court is now in session for the matter of the state versus Daniel and Meredith Monroe," she announced. James Harper rose. "Your Honor, the prosecution intends to prove that the defendants, under financial motivation and with premeditated intent, attempted to murder their daughter, Isabel Monroe, by pushing her from a cliff and later, by attempting to poison her." A murmur rippled through the gallery. James began with the timeline, how Isabel had been paralyzed in a car accident, how she inherited a trust fund, and how over time, the defendant's behavior turned from supportive to controlling, then deadly. Then he presented the GPS data. On the screen, a digital map appeared. A thin red line traced a route from our home to Black Hollow Cliff. It paused exactly where her wheelchair had gone over the edge. This was not a casual nature walk. James said, this was the path of a plan. Next, he introduced the security footage. The video played in front of everyone, our parents standing in the driveway days before the incident. The room fell silent as Mom's voice filled the courtroom. "She'll never have a normal life. This trip, it's the cleanest option we'll get." Then Dad's answer, "No one will suspect a thing." People shifted in their seats. A teacher from Isabel's high school covered her mouth in horror. My mother broke into quiet sobs. My father stared at the table, unmoving. Then came the final blow, the toxicology report. James held up the lab results as the forensic chemist took the stand. "This water bottle," the chemist said, "contained a high dose of sedative. Enough to render someone unconscious within minutes, and in the case of someone with neurological complications, possibly fatal." "Could it have been a mistake?" James asked. The chemist shook her head. "No, this was deliberate." When the nurse who'd intercepted the water testified next, her words cut like knives. They left it by her bed and left within seconds. No hug, no questions. They weren't there to comfort her. They were there to ensure something. James turned to the judge. "We rest, Your Honor. The defense tried to mount a case. Their attorney claimed it was all misunderstanding, that the cliff was an accident, that the water bottle was from an old prescription Isabel used before the accident and had somehow been mistaken. But the jury didn't buy it. You could see it in their faces, in the furrowed brows, in the way they leaned toward the prosecution's table. Then the judge called Isabel to the stand. The air went still. I wheeled her up slowly, my hands shaking as I locked her wheels in place. She sat tall. "I thought they loved me," she said softly. "I thought I was safe." She paused, looking directly at Mom and Dad. "But when they took me to that cliff, I saw it in their eyes. I asked if we were really just going for a walk, and they said, 'It'll be peaceful.' That's when I knew something was wrong." She took a trembling breath. "Then, my dad pushed me. Murmurs spread. One woman near the back wiped away tears. My mom whispered, 'It's done.' I heard her. I remember." James stepped forward gently. "And then what happened, I remember falling. The wind, the feeling of being thrown away. And then I woke up, and my sister was carrying me up a cliff. She saved me. She looked at me then. Her eyes were glassy but strong. She believed me when no one else would. She kept me alive. And now, I just want the truth to matter." The courtroom was silent when I wheeled her back to her seat. My parents were called last. Mom broke first. I didn't mean to, I was just so tired," she sobbed. "We gave everything for her. We loved her. But after the accident, she was different. Everything was harder. We lost Grandpa. I lost myself." She looked toward Isabel, reaching out across the courtroom like it mattered. "I'm so sorry." "Sweetheart." Isabel didn't flinch. Dad didn't cry. He stood straight, composed. "I was under pressure." He said, "We had debts. Meredith thought she believed it was the only way. He paused. "She would have suffered." That's what I told myself. His voice cracked. But I see now. I was wrong. It was too late. The judge asked the jury to deliberate. They returned in under 3 hours. The courtroom held its breath. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, the foreperson read, "We find Daniel Monroe guilty. We find Meredith Monroe guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, the same guilty. Mom sobbed into her hands. Dad stared blankly ahead. The judge's voice was unshakable. I hereby sentence both defendants to 25 years in state prison, without the possibility of parole for the first 15 years. A collective exhale swept through the room. It was over. I turned to Isabel and wrapped my arms around her. She shook against me, but this time, it wasn't from fear, it was release. "We're safe," I whispered. "They can't touch us anymore. Outside, the cameras flashed. We didn't give statements. We didn't need to. The truth had spoken for us." We left the courthouse in silence. 2 sisters bathed in winter light, our hands entwined. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, we could walk or roll down it free of shadows. After the sentencing, the silence hit differently. For weeks, I had lived in survival mode, plotting, watching, collecting, protecting. Every second had been fueled by fear, rage, and purpose. But now, with our parents behind bars and justice finally served, there was nothing, just a strange, aching stillness. Isabel and I moved out of Ashford Hollow within days of the verdict. We didn't say goodbye to anyone. There was no point. The town was a theater stage we'd been forced to perform on for too long. Every street corner held a shadow. Every glance from a neighbor felt like judgment wrapped in pity. We needed distance. We needed anonymity. So we left. I chose a small apartment in Portland close to my university and Isabel's rehab center. It wasn't fancy, but it had light. That was all I wanted. Windows that breathed, a view of trees, a space where we could begin again, without whispers or ghosts. The first few days felt strange. We didn't talk much. We didn't cry. We just existed. I unpacked books while Isabel stared out the window. She didn't play cello anymore. Her hands still trembled too much, and her posture had changed, but she drew sketches of trees, of cliff edges, of faceless people with tangled shadows behind them, art that carried grief in every line. One evening, I sat beside her on the floor as she shaded the outline of a field. "Do you ever miss them?" I asked. She paused, pencil hovering midair. "No," she said softly. "But sometimes I miss who I thought they were." That landed like a stone in my chest, and because I felt it too. We had grown up thinking our parents were good people, that love was a given, that family meant safety. Now we knew better. A month passed. Isabel began physical therapy in earnest, working on upper body strength and mobility. Her therapists were gentle but firm, encouraging her to push past her own hesitations. "You're stronger than you think," one of them told her. I saw it, too. The way she transferred herself from bed to chair without flinching. The way she insisted on pushing herself up ramps, even when I offered help. She wasn't the same Isabel who had played Mozart in concert halls, but she was building something new. Resilience from the ashes. And I was learning to breathe again. I returned to my final semester at medical school, juggling patient rotations and part-time work while helping Isabel settle into her routine. There were moments where I thought I'd collapse from exhaustion, but they were always softened by the quiet reminder that she was alive, that we were free. One rainy evening, I came home late and found Isabel in the living room, her sketchbook balanced on her lap. She looked up and smiled, small but real. "You're soaked," she said. I walked, I replied, shaking out my jacket. She rolled closer, eyes twinkling. "I drew something today." She handed me the page. It was a sketch of two girls sitting beneath a tree, holding hands. Behind them was a jagged cliff, and in the sky above, birds flew in every direction. "It's us," she said, after I blinked hard. "It's beautiful. It's not finished," she murmured, "but it's starting to feel like hope." Weeks later, something unexpected happened. She asked if we could visit the prison. I froze. "Why, I don't know," she said. "I'm not going to forgive them. I just want to see what they look like now. I want to know if they regret it, or if they're still pretending." I didn't answer right away. Every instinct screamed no. But then I saw the look in her eyes, not fear, not anger, just clarity. She wasn't seeking closure, she was confronting it. So we scheduled the visit. The Oregon State Correctional Facility was surrounded by steel fences and guarded silence. We sat in the visitation room, divided by thick glass. Isabel's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her position in her chair. Then the door opened. Our parents walked in, both thinner, both older. My father's once pristine hair was now streaked with gray and combed flat. My mother wore no makeup, her face tired and hollow. "They stopped when they saw us," my mother gasped. "Isabel." She reached for the phone. Isabel didn't move. My father said nothing. "I'm not here to forgive you," Isabel said into the receiver. "I just needed to see that you don't have power over me anymore." My mother began crying loud, theatrical sobs that filled the chamber. My father simply stared, blank-faced. "Was it worth it?" I asked him. "The money? The control?" His eyes flicked to mine just for a second. There was no answer. Just silence. We stood. My mother reached toward the glass. "Please, Isabel, Sam, we can talk. We can explain." But Isabel was already rolling toward the exit. Her voice was calm, steady. "You explained enough when you pushed me. We didn't speak during the drive home. But when we returned to the apartment and she opened the window to let in the breeze, she turned to me and said, 'I'm done being afraid of them.' And I believed her." Spring came late that year. It crept in quietly, like someone unsure they were welcome. The days grew longer, but the air still held winter's breath. On a hill just above our apartment in Portland, wildflowers bloomed without permission, small, defiant bursts of color in a world that had tried so hard to erase softness. Isabel and I started going there every weekend. I'd pack us sandwiches, and we'd sit together in the grass, her sketchbook in her lap, my medical notes in mine. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't some grand social media-worthy recovery story. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, real felt enough. Isabel's therapy had progressed faster than anyone expected. Her upper body strength was remarkable, and she'd begun learning to drive using adaptive controls. I'll never forget the first time she drove us to the grocery store, her hand gripping the wheel. Her laughter unfiltered as she parked perfectly. "Still got it," she said. "You never lost it." I told her. She smirked. "You're just saying that because I didn't crash." But deep down, we both knew what that moment meant. Control, autonomy, reclamation. It wasn't just about driving. It was about choosing her own direction. As for me, I graduated medical school that summer, at the ceremony, when my name was called. I looked out over the crowd. There were no proud parents holding up phones, no mother dabbing her eyes, no father standing to clap. But there was Isabel, front row, in her chair, holding a sign she'd made herself. She saved a life before she ever wore the white coat. I laughed and cried all at once. When I received my diploma, the dean asked if I had family present. I turned and pointed to her. "Only the one that matters." That night, we celebrated with takeout pizza and cheap sparkling cider. We sat on the couch, our feet up, faces glowing in the light of the TV as we watched reruns of hospital dramas and critiqued the medical errors. "You're going to be incredible," Isabel said, raising her plastic cup to mine. "You already are. I replied. We toasted, not to revenge, not to justice, to survival, to freedom, in the fall. I began my residency at a local hospital, focusing on trauma recovery and rehabilitation. Isabel, in turn, applied to be a volunteer art instructor at a nonprofit that served young people with disabilities. On her first day, she came home smiling in a way I hadn't seen since before the accident. There was this girl, she told me. She's in a chair, too. Lost her ability to walk after a ski accident. She kept saying she wasn't useful anymore. And what did you tell her? I said. You don't have to move legs to move hearts. I couldn't have been prouder if she'd cured cancer. We rarely talked about our parents after that. Occasionally, their names came up when filling out paperwork or answering awkward questions from people who didn't know. But emotionally, they were gone. We'd buried them not in the ground, but in the past. And yet, one day, as we sat watching the rain slide down our kitchen window, Isabel turned to me and said, "Do you ever wonder if they feel anything now?" Guilt, regret, I thought for a moment. Maybe, maybe not. Does it matter? I shook my head. Not to us. We lived. We chose to grow. She nodded. That's enough. A year after the trial, we returned to Black Hollow Cliff, not for revenge, not to reclaim anything, just to look. The forest was the same still, quiet, indifferent. The trail had been cleared since, and a warning sign now stood at the edge of the overlook: danger, unstable ground. Stay back. We stood together at the fence, wind blowing Isabel's hair gently across her face. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just took out her sketchbook and began to draw. When she was done, she handed it to me. It was a picture of two girls, one standing, one sitting facing the horizon. Behind them was the cliff. Ahead of them, only sky. You kept me alive, she said softly. But you also reminded me how to live. I didn't do it alone. I whispered. We saved each other. We walked away from that place not as victims, not even just as survivors, but as women who had turned pain into power. On the first anniversary of the trial, a reporter reached out. She wanted to write a follow-up, a feature about two sisters who exposed a perfect family's darkest secrets. She wanted drama, headline material. I declined the interview, but I sent her a quote to end her article with, "We were betrayed by the people who should have protected us. But in that betrayal, we found each other, and that was more than enough." Today, our apartment is filled with life. Isabel teaches 5 art classes a week. Her students adore her, especially the ones who come in thinking they're broken. I work long shifts, often exhausted, but fulfilled. I've started developing a specialty in rehabilitative care, designing programs not just for recovery, but for dignity. On our living room wall, we've hung a painting she finished last month. It's a field of wild daisies swaying in the wind, just like the ones that used to grow behind our old house. But in the corner, nearly hidden, are 2 figures standing hand in hand. They're not looking back, they're looking forward. Some nights, when we sit on the balcony watching the sun dip behind the buildings, Isabel leans her head on my shoulder. "Do you think we'll ever forget?" she asks. I always tell her the truth. No, but we'll outgrow it. And that, I've come to believe, is its own kind of miracle.